And testing, 1 2 3. Hi, and welcome to this next video in this series. And this week we're going to start looking at the as a really basic introduction to the to adding textures to our model and sort of playing about with some of the settings. Again, we're not going to go into too much depth into this because this is a highly specialist role, which people spend a long time sort of working out and building out and getting good at. We're just going to sort of add a small amount of it to enhance our animation, and obviously I would encourage you to explore and experiment with a variety of these textures. So first things first, we've got our animation, we have our ball running down, and I'm quite happy with it. I'm not too fussed with how squishy and everything is at the moment. I'm still going to show you how to add a material, regardless of if the actual object itself squishes or not. So first thing we're going to do is just remove this editable motion trail, because it's kind of in the way. So I'm just going to get the outliner up. So if we just go to Windows, go down to the outliner, open that up, select your motion trail handle, and just push delete. And it will just take that away, excuse me. So have our sphere floating in space, and we've got our keyframes set, and we can see it's bouncing. Yeah, we're happy. So first thing we're going to do is open our Hypershade. So we can access it by clicking this icon here. As you can see, it's highlighted, or we can go to Windows, Rendering Editors, and the Hypershade. So once this loads up, I'll just give a bit of an explanation of what's here. So let's just take that up to default. So within our Hypershade, as you can see, we have our materials that will be placed in this sort of reference section over here. We will have in the browser, we will have our create section where we can create all our different textures and bits that we need. In this part here, we have our areas where we can check the connections of all the nodes. In other words, how the materials, as we attach different, as we link them together, work. And over here we have our sort of preview window, okay, our material viewer, and down here we have our property editor, which allows us to just change those attributes of each sort of texture. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're just going to sort of have a look at this list, and you can see there's a variety of many things. Now you'll see a lot of things within this list that are not textures, and don't be fooled into thinking they are and that they will create them. You may be working with a version which has mental ray visible down here, and you'll see all these fancy titles. They won't necessarily work without mental ray turned on, or without being plugged into another material. But for today, we are just going to work with my defaults. So if we select Maya over here, these materials are essentially all of your defaults. Okay, these are the most common types used, and I would always recommend referring to these initially, especially at this sort of entry level stage. So we've got Blinn, Lambert, Fung E, Ramp Shader, Surface Shader, which I generally use quite a lot. Okay, so given that we're creating a bouncy ball, and we know we want to think about the properties of what we're creating, I think I said mine was probably something really squishy like a rubber bouncy ball, and so to create a sort of texture that's going to sort of represent the type of bouncy balls that we get, which is quite lucid, I'm going to select a Lambert. So as you can see in here, our Lambert material has been made, called Lambert 2. We can rename that if we want. We can just call this Test 1, and you will see over in the properties all the different colours. So if we select like a really vibrant colour, so I think probably like a reddy orange, something around here, I think. Yeah, there we go. Create this really bright lucid colour. And you can see here, it's really interesting looking object. that actually allows you to see the shadows and lighting from every angle. So you'll be able to see how it might affect a building, how it might affect a sphere, and it's really useful for seeing all of those kind of shapes that you may have in your scene before you would go to assign to the object. So you can see how the light reacts. Because we're working with a ball, I'm going to change this to a sphere, but obviously you can play through this list and see what sort of different things there are. There's like ocean, it's like a glass fill, which is pretty cool, glass splash. So again, just have a look through, see what you find, find the one that suits sort of what you're working with. So we have our colour, we have it set, and now all that's left to do is to sort of assign that to our object. Okay, so we select our object. We can take our test one material here in the browser, and hold down the right mouse button and drag up to assign material to selection, and let go. Now you may find, for whatever reason, you can't see anything, and you'll probably find this later on when we start adding textures. Just make sure you have hardware texturing ticked in a shading window here, and you should be fine. So we have our sphere on our texture, and we're kind of happy with it. You know, we can change the transparency if we want to make that a bit more faint, and we can start to see that background through that. You can add more ambient, which adds more background lighting, subtle lighting. Those sort of shadows disappear. Incandescence is again self-illumination, which can work and cannot work at times. Again, creates a really vibrant looking ball. Now that's how we sort of imagine a bouncy ball. If we think back to that Sony Bravia advert many years ago with the bouncy balls, you know, and it was picked. They were picked specifically because of this bright tangent. So we don't need to play with the diffuse there, but again, because they were glowing, and it sort of really exaggerated that colour of the Sony Bravia. That's what we're trying to communicate. So this is cool, and obviously if we start to bounce that now, you'll see that it goes down. You can see the light there changing at this point. So by default our lights are where our camera position is. So if we change this material, if we make this more vibrant, okay, so we bring up the Hypershade, and we can change our material, okay, and we'll change that to, where we go, okay, we used to be able to change that down here. Presets, no. I may have changed this. That's okay, we can create another material. Yeah, there used to be a sort of box, we could change that. That's fine. So if we create a func, and we just pull this across, and we'll change this to, apologies for that, and we change this to test 2. We can see this is a lot shinier. That light's hitting a lot harder, reflecting a lot harder from there. So if we go back, we can select our orange material, go back to our ambient colour, take that right up, and we get that little bit of shine coming off. It looks pretty cool. Okay, now as you can see with that there, if we select our object and add test 2, you'll see this time that light is there and that spot's following the camera around. But as the ball warps, you'll see it changes shape. So just close this down. You'll see that light and that reflection is changing depending where our camera is, which adds that little bit extra realism to our object. Okay. So, what next? So at this point, you know, you can play around with those, but you may want to add your own sort of texture and texture material to your object. So what we can do is start to add that by going back into our Hypershade, and this time we'll stick with this test. We'll stick with test 2, and we're going to go and add a color material to this. A texture material to this, a picture file. So if we go down to this next menu here and select on the mail, you see them all. You'll see that we can click a file, What we want to do is actually attach that to our colour channel over here. So what we could do is create that and then wire it in, and it does get quite messy very quickly on the Node browser, Node editor. So what we can do is click this little checker box, and we'll select File, and you'll see it pops this up here. As you see all the little nodes and wires hanging around, so exactly that, and you'll see the colours changed here now. And if we select our file, double click, you'll see our properties change, and if we go to image, you'll see this little folder on the side. Click the folder, and if you go to find your image wherever you've downloaded it, so in this instance I've actually downloaded a file, so if we go to projects, from online, and it's actually not there. If we go to here, there you go, golf ball, and you'll see that has now placed itself on top of the object. And if we close that down, you can see over here that it is now on the ball. Now it's a little bit stretched and warped. I don't really particularly think it's gone on there too well, if I'm completely honest. So very quickly, I'm just going to go up to UV. I'm going to go sphere, and this will change the way that it reads the texture file. So again, it's a little bit better there, still not perfect. Again, I think it's because it's treating it as a square object. So if we pull that, again we can just get something that feels a little bit more natural. So there's quite a few more balls there now. And it's still not great, especially from the top. But we're going to warp it. And again, if you just go back into object mode by holding down the right mouse button, go to object mode, you will see this ball stretch, squash and stretch, that little bit of texture on. Okay, and yes, it's not great. You know, golf balls and anything with golf texture should not be stretching that much. If we zoom a little bit closer, we can start to see those textures. Okay, and that's cool. But we want to add, say we want to add more depth. Excuse me. And again, this texture isn't seamless, which is why we can see this cut. We'd have to edit this in Photoshop to make it seamless, but we're not going to do that at this point in time. For the benefit of these lessons is to get you familiar with the basic functions and basic processes within Maya. So don't worry too much about that right now. So if we go back to our Hypershade, I'm actually going to change this material. I've actually got something else that I want to throw on this. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly undo the UV edit that we did. No, actually, no, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it. Yeah, let's keep it. Right. So we're going to go back to our file, and I'm going to add in another file that I have that I've downloaded from CG Textures, which I highly recommend signing up to. Really, really great. They do have a premium account, but they do give you free credits. Okay. I really do recommend signing up to this site. They will become invaluable to you when you're creating your assets. So I downloaded, let's just go back and find that folder I was heading to before I realised it was the wrong one. I'm saving this into the image folder. So you'll see I've created this. I've got this cracked texture offline, which is like some dried up dirt, and you'll see it looks kind of cool. We've still got our orange ambient, which is fine, but again, the only issue that I have with this is it still looks really flat. And as a result, our reflections, the way I like this is bouncing off this is as though it's got a clean glaze over the surface, and all of this is happening, all this texture and detailed information is underneath the object, which just is not natural. I want the light to be reacting off all these little rivets and creating a really, really cool, you know, really, really rock lit piece. Okay. So if we go back into Hypershade, I keep going back down, tap on window, and we go to our test2, okay, which is the parent object here, you'll see that we have a bump and normal map. Now, a bump map uses a value of black and white, and it treats the it will treat either the black as being indented and the white as being lifted, or vice versa. And to do that and to make that most effective, we have to load our texture into Photoshop. Now you'll see the contrast on this is okay. We can still see some extra cracks, but we really want to bring that out some more. So the first thing we need to do, if you go to open Photoshop, go File, open up your file, like I have done here, and go to Image, Adjustments, and in fact we're going to turn this into a grayscale image. So go to Image, go to Black and White, click OK. It will turn that to black and white, and then what we want to do is go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, and by putting these down, we'll take our white lighter, and we can take our dark to be darker, and then our contrast will lift up, and you'll suddenly see all these extra pieces of detail which were washed out before start to reveal themselves, and it will make our surface look far more visually interesting because it's got such a much more vibrant range on its contrast. So click OK, go to File, Save As, and this time I'm just going to save over the one I did before. Click Yes, and click OK. Make sure it's on JPEG, by the way, I forgot to say that. So go File, Save As, make sure it's on JPEG. And you can do that by going to the drop down list at the bottom of this box. So if we just load that up, let's go down here, click JPEG, okay. So what we can do now is go down to our bump and normal map and click this little checkered box again, which will attach our object to it. And if we go to File, which gives us our image, and let's just pull these all around. It can get quite messy, so a little bit of lag there. And what we're going to do in our file image, file section, is add our image. So we go to our bump, so I've saved it with bump next to it, not over our original one, otherwise it will change the original. And click open, and you'll see instantly that has changed. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that. Okay, do you see that? And just go to redo. I can't remember the short. I think it's Control Y. Yes, Control Y. There you go. So again, if we actually try and edit that on here, we're not going to get very far because we're still on File 2. What we need to do is go to the bump texture, and we can actually change that depth. So we can increase that, or we can decrease it and actually reverse it. So at this point, the darker cracks are on top of the surface. If I put it up, okay, you can see it's going flat. It's really cool. We can see that the cracks are below. Okay. So again, and we can increase and decrease that as much as we like. We can also offset that. I think it's this. Was it this one? No, that's just making the filter thicker. Oh, I've just saved it by mistake. Rather than Control Z. So I'm just going to let this finish thinking, and I think, oh, there we go. Okay, right, done. Right, so if you take that back down, there we go. It's the offset here. We can change where about that happens, which is pretty cool. But it's not going to help us get an accurate bump relationship. Okay, as you can see, it does make it a little bit messy. Which can be kind of cool if you're creating a planet type molten thing, but in this case we're not, so we're just going to keep it there. So if we go back to our objects here, you can see now we have this really cool rock that's sort of bending, and obviously you can see how that light is flickering through all those little bumps, okay, which is really cool. And obviously if we start bouncing that, find our view, I mean, can't really tell from this point of our texture, but again, you can almost feel it. Okay. So again, it would be really cool for you to experiment with those, get an idea of what type of ball you are creating. Again, I would like to see a serious version of a bouncing ball that's been textured appropriately, but I'd also like to see you have some fun and experiment. Okay. So again, we haven't gone too much in depth. It's been a real basic introduction, but that's okay for this stage. So just have an experiment, play around, see what you think, and I will see you in the next lesson. So take care.